Good morning, everyone. Lee Henson here, president and founder of AgileDad, and it's time for this week's edition of the Daily Stand-Up, so without any further ado, let's get started. You know, today's Labor Day, so I wanted to keep things lightweight, and I wanted to focus on something that is still foundational and fundamental in order for your Scrum project to be successful. We're hoping to get some more advanced topics here later on in the week, but for today, I wanted it to be something where you could relax, enjoy your day, and just think about, the reminder. Because I think sometimes if we understand the basic rules in Scrum and the basics of what we need to be doing, and we can perfect those, it makes the remainder of our Scrum implementation that much easier to absorb. So coming in at number one of the top 10 things we need to make sure we're doing is that every sprint should be month-long in duration or less. Some people choose to do 4 weeks or less. Either way you count is fine with me. One of the things that I like to tell people to focus on is that shorter is better. Oftentimes we allow Parkinson's law to creep in and we expand the work to fill the allocated amount of time. So I think it's better to err on the side of caution and when possible to make sure that we're doing sprints of even 2 weeks or less. Now, that's not to say there's not an argument for a 4-week sprint or a month-long sprint in certain situations or cases, but I think it's just important for us to really get our focus straight and make sure that we understand what the right sprint length is for our organization and to make sure that we're on track to follow that and that we're doing always month or less, erring on the side of shorter. Coming in at number 2, there's never a break between sprints. Now, I've been in a lot of organizations where they try to do a pause in between or hardening, or maybe they do some adjustment to allow for automated tests to be built. And while in theory this might sound like a good idea, that work should actually be built into the actual sprint. The purpose for this is in order for us to remain or to become predictable. One of the things that I hear the most from leadership is that they love doing Agile, they love doing Scrum, but they hate that it's just not predictable. If we reduce the breaks in between sprints and don't allow those and just have our sprints line up back to back and get all the work inclusive into the sprint, that's going to afford us a greater opportunity to become predictable and to really be able to do forecasting like we haven't been able to do in the past. Coming in at number 3, we should keep every sprint the same length. So if we start out with 2-week sprints, we should potentially be doing 2-week sprints all the way through. We don't want to change the sprint length. Now, I do know rare exceptions where for holidays, for example, someone may say, hey, I want to adapt or adjust the sprint length by a day or two just to accommodate for a holiday, in which case I call that an exception to the rule. I want to make sure that we understand that this should not be a regular cadence. That if your team is struggling one sprint, you don't expand it, and then next sprint shorten it, and next sprint expand it. We try our best to keep the sprints the same length, once again for the same reason. The goal is to become predictable, and it's hard to become predictable if you're constantly changing things. Coming in at number 4, every sprint, our goal is to release a potentially shippable product or service. Now, that counts whether you're building software, hardware, it doesn't matter what you're building. You should try to have something that adds value every single sprint. And if it adds value, even if it's not a completely shippable product, it should be better than what you had the previous sprint. What you've added should have introduced no additional technical debt or defects. You want to make certain that what you add is something that's going to potentially make something better, hence the name potentially shippable. Coming in at number 5, every sprint should include a sprint planning meeting. Now, it might seem silly on the surface that I'm even bringing this up, but I know a lot of folks who are, trying to cross over and do some kind of hybrid between Scrum and Kanban. Many people call it Scrumban. While Scrumban works really effectively in some cases, that doesn't mean no planning. Just wanted to be clear. If you're leaning more towards Kanban and you're doing a first in, first out, a FIFO cycle, that's fine. But if you are following the sprint or Scrum guidelines, you should include a sprint planning meeting. Now, a sprint planning meeting doesn't need to be exorbitantly long. In most cases, I recommend no more than an hour per week of sprint. So if you're doing a 2-week sprint, 2 hours should be your max. However, what we find is that most of our sprint planning meetings, even for a 2-week sprint, only last about 40 minutes if you're prepared, 40 to 45 minutes. And more information about this can be found in the sprint. More information about this meeting and all the rest of the meetings can be found in the Agile Meetings Guide on the AgileDad website. Coming in at number 6, the sprint planning meeting should also be time boxed, and we just talked about that. We want to make certain that we are scoping and limiting that time box down. Now, in a traditional Scrum guide, I call for 2 hours per week of sprint length. I happen to think that's a little bit excessive. Once again, Parkinson's law kicks in, as well as meeting fatigue, especially with remote teams. I think it's important for us to get that sprint planning meeting down to an hour meeting if possible. Coming at number 7, the daily Scrum or daily stand-up occurs every single day at the same time in the same place. I can't emphasize how important this is. This should establish a rhythm or a heartbeat for the team and should give everyone on the outside an opportunity to visit if they'd like and see that the team is on track and that things are moving in the right direction. While this is not a daily status report, it's still important for us to have a daily accountability update and important for us to gather together and to make sure that we meet regularly so that we can discuss the things that should be accomplished or the things that we hope to be accomplished, as well as any impediments or things that might be preventing us from doing future work. Coming in at number 8, of course, we should time box that meeting. Now, the Scrum Guide and many other materials say 15 minutes. I always say 30 seconds per person, not to exceed 15 minutes. And I put this in there because if it's not a Q&A session where the Scrum Master is constantly interjecting, it should be pretty easy for someone to give a report of the things that they accomplished prior to things that they are committing to accomplish today, and any impediments that haven't yet been reported. You should be able to cover those things in 30 seconds. Some people take a little longer, and that's fine. There's no hard, fast rule saying 30 seconds per person. But I think that if we focus on 30 seconds per person and draw attention that way, it just emphasizes that this meeting is to be short in duration. So we want to make sure we keep it short and sweet. Coming in at number 9, we talk a little bit about the sprint review. So every single sprint you do should include a sprint review or demo for stakeholder feedback on the product. Now, I want to be careful here. When I say stakeholder feedback, sometimes that might mean internal stakeholder feedback. So if you were doing, for example, building a product and you're working on a security module or infrastructure or architecture, you want to make sure those groups who are most interested are present. Now, sometimes that might include some external stakeholders, but the last thing you want to do is get an external stakeholder in for your demo and show them a copy of your database schema. They won't be terribly impressed and they may not show up for another demo. And rounding out our list at number 10 is each and every sprint must include a sprint retrospective. This is the only way the team's ever going to get better. This is the only way they have to inspect and adapt for their productivity and for the process. So I think it's incredibly important for us to help them regain focus and to help them understand what types of things they could be doing. And I think that if we're not doing this, we're skipping a very important step, and that's that self-visualization and self-improvement. And I think that that's not just important for teams, but I think it's important for individuals as well. Just last week or a week prior, we talked about the importance of introspect versus retrospect. So I think it's just important for us to really gain an understanding of how we're going to conduct our retrospective in a way that's going to yield the most positive results. And I think if we do these 10 things, it's really just going to help us foundationally get our head around where we should be before we start making bigger decisions about how to scale or expand or broaden our Agile scope and trying to figure out what we're trying to do as an organization or company. Well, I wish you all a happy Labor Day if you're here in the U.S. If you're abroad, I wish you a happy Monday. And as always, we encourage you to visit the AgileDad website where you can learn more about this topic and other Agile topics. And until next time, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay Agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.